Hey guys, I am currently in St. Augustine, Florida. Over my shoulder there is the old Spanish fort, which I'll tell you more about that later. I'm actually going to try to go in there either today or the next day. And so I wanted to kind of show a little bit of historical St. Augustine. I won't be able to spend as much time here as I would like, but I will probably be back. So, some more of the fort. So I'll give you more detailed information on the fort, but in the meantime, what I'm going to do is kind of take you, at least for now, I'm going to take you through some of the old quarters. St. Augustine is the oldest city in Florida. And it is actually the oldest city in the United States. And it was discovered way back in the early 1500s. So it's been held by Spanish, French, and also the English. And so what I'm going to do is kind of give you a little bit of the old downtown quarter. They sort of preserved some of it, and it's pretty cool. And they have like an old schoolhouse here and all that stuff, and the original gates that went into the city itself. So you had the fort, and then they had all of these things here that were used to defend the city and whatnot. And then I'm gonna walk over here and cross down here a little bit, and I'll get back to you guys soon with the some of the downtown part. So, like over my shoulder there, that's some of the downtown and the entranceway. And all that, so it's pretty cool. There's so much history here in St. Augustine. Obviously, there's the Fountain of Youth, Ripley's Believe It or Not, the old quarters here. Flagler had a lot to do with here. There's Flagler College here, so there's a lot going on at St. Augustine that I probably won't be able to cover. So I will probably attempt to make a return trip at some point and cover it a little bit more, but I'm gonna try and condense as much as I can. So without further ado, let me figure out where I'm gonna cross this crazy street. I'll get back to you soon. All right, so Backpacker Mike welcomes you to St. Augustine, Florida. Okay guys, there's the fort over there, and then this was the actual entrance into the city of St. Augustine, founding city, founded by Pedro Menéndez in like 1565, I believe. So you would have had gates here. You can see where the holes are, and then these would have been where soldiers would have stood as a lookout. And so that is the gate entrance, and then this would be the entrance into the city itself, depending upon who owned it at the time, whether it was Spanish, French, or English, and the French were Argonauts. So I'm going to take a troll through here, and I'll show you guys some more stuff around here. There's all kinds of little places and shops you can go down. So I will get back to you soon. Just some old architecture here. St. Augustine also is considered one of the most haunted cities in Florida, and I believe one of the most haunted cities in the United States. So I'm just trying to walk around and see some of the history here. It's from the 1800s. take a picture of it, add it to the video so you can pause it and read it, but it's a pretty awesome sculpture. Just one of these cool things. They have little alleyways. It's like, you know, alleyways of French influence and also Spanish influence from when I was in Spain. These look like artillery lofts, apartments. Huh. And I believe that over there, I think, is Flagler College, which is named after Henry Flagler, who was the big railroad guy and oil guy here in the United States. He built the railroad that basically went the whole coast of Florida from north all the way down to Key West. And this is St. George Street. So a lot of the streets here are named after saints or kings and queens, obviously. And I've been here many times before, so I sort of know my way around, at least to the places that I have gone before. And so some of this stuff is new to me, which I'm trying to do on purpose. I'm trying to find places that I haven't actually been to yet, so that way it's sort of new for all of us. So I'm just kind of wandering around. I went into the cathedral over here, the basilica. It was the first basilica in the United States, and it was founded in 1536 or something like that, I believe. I'll put some more information up on it. I couldn't shoot video in there, although I did take some pictures, so I'll add that to the video. And I'll also post the pictures on my Facebook, Backpacker Mike. So I'll tell you the story about that. These little trolleys that will take you all over town. This is the Trinity Episcopal Church. This one was founded in 1821. And this all goes in with the English influence here. Protestants, Episcopals. There's the other church over there. There's a historical sign for prisoners of war in the St. Augustine during the American Revolution. So I'll go over there and take a picture of that for you guys too, but I have not really been in this park either. So it's pretty interesting, but you can see some of the old sculpture, the old architecture. That used to be the governor's house over there, way back, and here we go. Onset of the American Revolution in 1775, the British Crown Colony in East Florida was the Loyalist bastion. In its capital, St. Augustine, the British lodged as prisoners many American patriots and their French allies. Most of these prisoners were given the liberty of the town, but some were held in Castillo de San Marcos, which is the big castle, or the big fort that I showed. A few captives rented quarters, but most of the men were housed in unfinished state house, which stood near this spot. By the end of 1780, these prisoners included 3 signers of the Declaration of Independence: Thomas Hayward Jr., Arthur Middleton, and Edward Rutledge. Wow. On July 4, 1781, the Patriot captives celebrated Independence Day. Pretty crazy. And so here's an old cannon. Part of the armament of the historical Fort Marion, Castillo de San Marcos, before, during, and after the Civil War. And there's some cannonballs that were actual cannonballs, and then they just put concrete over it and painted them so that you couldn't take them. But those were cannonballs that were actually used. And there's a spire in remembrance, and there's another cannon over there. So there's several cannons. There's several cannons that go throughout this area, obviously, because they had to defend the city. And I'll show you a little more. There are a lot of bed and breakfasts here in St. Augustine. That house is one. There's another one down there where that guy in the red shirt is. Here's another bed and breakfast right here. Casas Suenos. And they sort of litter a lot of the area around here on these back streets. There's another one right next to it. That one's a bed and breakfast. The one with the blue sign out front right there. And so they're all how you doing? There's all bed and breakfasts that you can stay. There's also several hotels that you can stay at. There's a campground out on Amelia Island, or Anastasia Island, sorry. That's pretty inexpensive, about $28 a night for a tent. Here's another old cemetery. Now, the Argonaut Cemetery, which are French Argonauts, encompass the front part of the city, and most of that cemetery was created, I believe it was in the early 1800s, 1820 or so, when yellow fever hit. And so there's a lot of bodies buried in the other cemetery up front. As the motorcycles come rolling by. But you can see how old some of this is. It's like an old brick casket there. And there's people coming out of the mausoleum. But I took a ghost tour here before in St. Augustine, because like I said before, it's one of the most haunted cities. And it's called Tolamato. And so this was one of the cemeteries that they stopped at, and I forget the story that they told about this cemetery or who supposedly haunts it, but supposedly there are ghosts wandering around in the middle of the night here. So here we go. Here's the cemetery itself. I'll read it off to you real quick. It says, during the first Spanish period prior to 1763, this site was occupied by the Christian Indian village of Tolamato, with its chapel and burying ground served as Franciscan missionaries. The village was abandoned when Great Britain acquired Florida. In 1777, Father Pedro Camps, pastor of the Minorcan colonists who had come to St. Augustine after the failure of Andrew Turnbull's settlement in New Smyrna Beach, which is south of here in Florida, obtained permission from the governor Patrick Tonyan to establish this cemetery for his parishioners. Father Camps was buried here in 1790. 10 years later, his remains were reinterred in the new church, the present cathedral. The first bishop of St. Augustine, Augustine Barrett, is buried in the mortuary chapel at the rear of the cemetery. The last burial took place in 1892. So the last person buried in here was in 1892. And that white chapel down there is where that last priest was buried, the bishop of St. Augustine. So let's continue on. Hey guys, so I stopped at this place called Moho Old City Barbecue, and I got a pulled pork quesadilla, and I'll tell you, this thing is amazing. And I've got some chipotle barbecue sauce, and it came with some awesome salsa, but there's some really tender pulled pork inside there, and cheese, which is really amazing. And outside is done perfect, crispy. Absolutely delicious. It was $9.50 for the quesadilla. And I got a tea, half and half. So I'll put the total of the bill on the screen for you, but if you make it to St. Augustine, go to Moho Old City Barbecue and check out this quesadilla. It is so filling. I'm barely able to finish the last piece, and it's absolutely delicious. So I will see more of St. Augustine here shortly, and until then, talk to you soon. So we got here, as there is a palm tree growing out of this tree. I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but that is what's called a love tree. And so there's a few of those around St. Augustine that are called love trees, and it's actually a palm tree that is growing out of one of those old oaks, and I believe there's 3 or 4 of those around here, so it's pretty interesting. Now the folklore behind that is, which I think dates back to Seminole Indians, is that if you kiss the love of your life underneath that tree, or one of those trees, you'll have an everlasting courtship or love. So, don't know if it's true or not, but hey, that's what they say. Alright, so let's keep exploring.